Six white men sat in a basement in Memphis, Tennessee, planning a murder. Their target? Nat King Cole, the most famous black entertainer in America. The man whose voice made white women swoon and whose success made white men furious. The plan was simple. Wait until after the concert. Follow him to his car. Beat him to death with baseball bats. Send a message that black performers weren't welcome in the South. What they didn't plan for was Bumpy Johnson. Because when Bumpy heard that Harlem's greatest singer was being hunted, he didn't make a phone call. He didn't send a message. He got on a train, traveled 1,000 miles, and walked into that basement 3 days before the concert. He didn't bring a bat. He brought his razor. And what happened in that basement made 6 racists realize they'd made the last mistake of their lives. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. Nat King Cole was 31 years old and at the peak of his career. Mona Lisa had just topped the charts, the first time a black artist had achieved that kind of mainstream success. His voice was smooth as silk, his piano playing was genius, and his crossover appeal was unprecedented. White audiences loved him, and that was exactly the problem. In 1950, the South was a powder keg. The civil rights movement was beginning to stir. Black artists were achieving success that made them visible, powerful, threatening to the racial order that white supremacists had built their entire world around. Nat King Cole represented everything they feared. A black man who was wealthy, famous, talented, and loved by white women. A black man who didn't know his place. A black man who dared to be excellent. So when his tour announced a stop at the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis on September 17th, certain people decided to make a statement. September 8th, 1950, 9:45 p.m., Garrett's Steakhouse, downtown Memphis. Marcus Webb moved through the dining room like a ghost, seen but not noticed, the way black waiters had learned to exist in white spaces. Marcus was 34 years old and had been working at Garrett's for 6 years. It was one of the finest restaurants in Memphis. Whites only, expensive steaks, bourbon that cost more per glass than Marcus made in a day. The kind of place where powerful men met to discuss business, politics, and other things they didn't want overheard, except Marcus heard everything. Table 7 had been drinking since 7 p.m. 6 white men in expensive suits, cigars, laughter that got louder with each round. Marcus knew the type. Businessmen, professionals, the kind who owned things, properties, businesses, people. As Marcus refilled their bourbon glasses, he kept his face carefully neutral and his ears wide open. That colored boy thinks he can just waltz into Memphis and sing for white women, the thick-necked man at the head of the table said. Thomas Crenshaw. Marcus knew him. Construction company owner. Money. Reputation for cruelty. Nat King Cole, Edward Willis added, the bank manager. Making millions off our people. It's an insult. Someone should teach him a lesson, Robert Hayes muttered. We will. This came from David Morrison, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. Morrison was a detective with Memphis PD. Everyone in the black community knew his name, knew his reputation for brutality. Thursday night, Carl's basement, 9 p.m. We finalized the plan. Baseball bats, another man said. James Tucker, the lumberyard owner. Simple, effective. After his concert, parking lot, done. They laughed. Marcus kept pouring, kept his face blank, kept breathing steady. The 6th man, Carl Jennings, hardware store owner, raised his glass to sending a message. To putting that uppity nigger back in his place, Crenshaw added. They drank. Marcus refilled. His hands didn't shake, couldn't shake. Not here, not now. But his mind was racing. Nat King Cole, concert, baseball bats, murder, Thursday meeting. At 11:30 p.m., after Table 7 had finally left, Marcus found the payphone in the kitchen. His hands were shaking now. He dialed a number he'd memorized 3 years ago, a number given to him by a Pullman porter who'd said, "If you ever hear something important, something dangerous, you call this number. Ask for Bumpy Johnson." The phone rang 3 times. A deep voice answered. "Yeah, Mr. Johnson?" Marcus's voice was low. "My name is Marcus Webb. I work at a restaurant in Memphis. I just heard something you need to know about. It's about Nat King Cole." There was a pause. Then, "I'm listening." Marcus told him everything. The 6 men, the names, the Thursday meeting at Carl Jennings' hardware store basement, the baseball bats, the parking lot plan, the concert on September 17th. When he finished, Bumpy Johnson was quiet for a long moment. "You got faces for these names?" "Yes, sir. I served them all night. I know every one of them. One's a police detective, David Morrison." "Good. Marcus, you did the right thing calling me. Now listen carefully. You forget this conversation happened. You go to work tomorrow like normal. You don't tell anyone what you heard. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "If anything happens, if these men suspect you heard them, you call this number immediately. I'll handle it." "Mr. Johnson, are you going to stop them?" Bumpy's voice was ice. "I'm going to do more than stop them. I'm going to make sure they never threaten another black artist as long as they live." The line went dead. Marcus hung up, hands still shaking. He didn't know who Bumpy Johnson was, just a name, a number, a voice in the dark. But something in that voice told him Nat King Cole was going to be safe. Bumpy Johnson hung up the phone and sat in silence for a full minute. At 35 years old, Bumpy was Harlem's undisputed king. 3 years out of Sing Sing, he'd taken over the numbers racket, established his protection network, and made it clear to every gangster in New York, Harlem was his. But Memphis was 1,000 miles away, 9 days until the concert, and 6 racists with police protection were planning to murder Nat King Cole. Bumpy looked at the money on his desk, $18,000 from the week's numbers take. Enough to buy a small building, enough to expand his operation, enough to matter. He pushed it aside. At 5 a.m., Bumpy packed. 2 suits, toiletries, his straight razor, and a .38 revolver. He caught the 6 a.m. train south, Penn Station to Memphis, 40 hours through 6 states. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Didn't need to. Stephanie St. Clair would handle Harlem while he was gone, because some things were more important than business. Some things were worth 1,000 miles and every dollar in his pocket. Nat King Cole's voice was one of those things. 40 hours after leaving Harlem, Bumpy stepped off the train at Memphis Union Station. The heat hit him immediately. Southern heat, thick and wet, different from New York. He checked into a colored boarding house on Beale Street under the name William Jackson, paying cash for a week. Then he went to work. By Monday afternoon, Bumpy had made his first contact. Samuel "Sweet Sam" Johnson, a barber who'd worked Harlem in the 30s before moving back home to Memphis. Sam owed Bumpy a favor from the old days. Bumpy walked into Sam's barber shop at 3 p.m. The shop went quiet. Sam looked up from the customer he was shaving, and his face went pale. Bumpy Johnson! Lord have mercy! After the shop closed, they talked. Bumpy gave him the names Marcus had provided. Sam filled in the details. Thomas Crenshaw, construction, money, racist, connected to the White Citizens Council. Edward Willis, bank manager, financing segregation efforts. Robert Hayes, insurance, quietly brutal. James Tucker, lumber, supplies the wood for Klan crosses. David Morrison, detective, the muscle, the one who'd make sure it looked like an accident. Carl Jennings, hardware store, meeting location. "They're serious, Bumpy," Sam said quietly. "The Citizens Council has been talking about making an example. Nat Cole's the perfect target, famous enough to matter, black enough to hate." "Where's Jennings' store?" Sam drew him a map. September 11th through 13th, Monday through Wednesday. For 3 days, Bumpy became a ghost in Memphis. He watched Carl Jennings' hardware store, learned the layout, found the basement entrance through the back alley, unlocked, no security, amateurs. He paid $20 to a cleaning woman who worked at First National Bank. She confirmed Edward Willis's schedule, his routine, his weaknesses. He tracked David Morrison, followed him from the precinct to Murphy's Tavern, where the detective drank every night after his shift. By Wednesday evening, September 13th, Bumpy had everything. 6 names, 6 faces, 6 targets. Meeting, Thursday, September 14th, 9 p.m., Jennings Hardware Basement. Concert, Sunday, September 17th, Ellis Auditorium. Plan, baseball bats, parking lot ambush after the show. Bumpy had 1 day to stop them, 1 night to end this before it began. September 14th, 1950, Thursday, 8:45 p.m. Bumpy stood in the alley behind Jennings Hardware, dressed in all black. In his right hand, his razor. In his waistband, the .38. At 9:10 p.m., all 6 men had arrived. Bumpy could hear them through the basement window, laughing, joking about what they'd do to that colored boy. Bumpy tried the back door, unlocked. He stepped inside. The basement was lit by a single hanging bulb. 6 men around a wooden table, 6 baseball bats leaning against the wall, a map of Ellis Auditorium spread out, an X marking the parking spot where they planned to kill Nat King Cole. They were so focused on their planning, they didn't hear the door open. Bumpy closed it. The soft click made them turn. 6 white faces, 1 black man. 3 seconds of silence. Then Thomas Crenshaw stood, chair scraping. "Who the hell are you? This is private." Bumpy walked to the table and placed his razor on top of the map, right over the X. "Sit down," Bumpy said quietly. Crenshaw didn't sit. "I don't know who you think." Bumpy pulled the .38 from his waistband, held it casually at his side. "I said sit the fuck down." Crenshaw sat. Bumpy looked around the table. 6 men, all bigger than him, all with weapons within reach, all terrified. "My name's Bumpy Johnson. I'm from Harlem, New York, and I'm here because I heard you gentlemen are planning to murder Nat King Cole." Edward Willis tried to speak. "We don't know what—" "Don't lie to me." Bumpy's voice cut through the room. "I know your names. Thomas Crenshaw, Edward Willis, Robert Hayes, James Tucker, David Morrison. Yes, detective, I know you're a cop. And Carl Jennings, who's stupid enough to host a murder conspiracy in his own basement." He gestured to the bats. "I know you bought 6 Louisville sluggers. I know the plan. Wait until after the concert, follow Nat to his car, beat him to death, send a message." The 6 men exchanged looks. Edward Willis's hand moved toward his hip, where his service weapon should have been, but he left it at the station, hadn't wanted to bring it to a private meeting. "Looking for this?" Bumpy tapped his .38. "I'm armed, detective. You're not, so sit still and shut up." Morrison's hand froze. "Here's what's gonna happen," Bumpy continued, his voice calm, almost friendly, which made it more terrifying. "On September 17th, Nat King Cole is gonna walk into that auditorium. He's gonna perform, he's gonna walk out, and he's gonna leave Memphis without a scratch." Thomas Crenshaw found his courage, or his stupidity. He reached for one of the baseball bats. Bumpy's hand moved, not with the gun, with the razor. The blade flashed. Crenshaw screamed. A deep cut opened across his reaching forearm, not deep enough to sever tendons, but deep enough to bleed and scar permanently. Crenshaw collapsed back into his chair, clutching his arm. Blood dripped onto the floor. Bumpy held up the razor, now red. "Anyone else want to try?" Nobody moved. "Good. Now let me explain something. You 6 think you're dangerous because you have bats and numbers and a cop on your side. But let me tell you what real danger is. Bumpy walked around the table slowly, the razor in one hand, the gun in the other. Real danger is a man who traveled 1,000 miles to protect someone he's never met. Real danger is a man who's killed more people than you've threatened. Real danger is me, right now, deciding whether you six deserve to keep breathing. He stopped behind Robert Hayes, placed the razor against his throat. Hayes went rigid, eyes wide. This blade has opened 37 throats in Harlem. Men tougher than you, men smarter than you. You know what they all had in common? Silence. Just Hayes' ragged breathing. They forgot that some people are protected, that some lines you don't cross. He pressed the razor just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. Hayes made a sound between a whimper and a sob. Nat King Cole is one of those people. He's Harlem's voice, Harlem's pride, and Harlem protects its own, even 1,000 miles from home. Bumpy released Hayes, who slumped forward, hand going to his bleeding neck. A dark stain spread across James Tucker's pants. He'd pissed himself. Now here's the new plan, Bumpy said. On September 17th, none of you will be anywhere near that auditorium. You'll be at home, at work, at church, but you won't be within a mile of Nat King Cole. And if we refuse, Willis's voice was barely a whisper, then I kill all 6 of you. Bumpy said it like he was discussing the weather. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I will hunt you down, one by one, and I will end you. He walked back to the table, picked up the map, and tore it in half. I know where you live. I know where you work. I know where your children go to school. Edward Willis, your daughter takes piano lessons on Tuesdays at Mrs. Henderson's house on Poplar Street. Carl Jennings, your wife shops at Cooper's Market every Saturday morning. David Morrison, you drink at Murphy's Tavern every night after your shift. Their faces went ashen. If anything happens to Nat King Cole, in Memphis, in Tennessee, anywhere in this country, I'm going to assume it was you, and I will come back, not with a razor, with gasoline and matches. Bumpy moved to the door, then stopped. One more thing. Thomas Crenshaw is bleeding. Get him bandaged. Tell the hospital he cut himself on broken glass, because if anyone hears about this meeting, if this becomes a police report or a newspaper story, I'll assume one of you talked, and talking has consequences. He looked at each man one final time. September 17th. Stay home. Stay alive. Bumpy walked out into the Memphis night. September 17th, 1950. Sunday. Ellis Auditorium. Bumpy had been watching the auditorium since 2 p.m. He'd positioned himself across the street, eyes scanning every entrance, every face, every car that pulled into the parking lot. At 7:30 p.m., Nat King Cole arrived in a black Cadillac. He stepped out, waved to the small crowd of fans who gathered, smiled that famous smile. Bumpy watched the crowd, scanned faces, looked for the 6. They weren't there. At 8 p.m., Nat walked onto the stage. 2,000 people, standing ovation before he even sat at the piano. Bumpy slipped inside, stood at the back of the auditorium. Nat began to play. Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. His voice filled the space, smooth, perfect, effortless. Every note a reminder of why Bumpy had traveled 1,000 miles, why he'd walked into a basement with 6 racists, why he'd risked everything. Because this voice, this talent, was too precious to lose. After the concert, Nat signed autographs in the parking lot, laughed with fans, posed for photographs, got in his Cadillac, and drove safely to his hotel. Bumpy watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he walked to the train station and caught the midnight train back to Harlem. Nat King Cole never knew about the basement, never knew about the 6 men with baseball bats, never knew that Bumpy Johnson had traveled 1,000 miles and spilled blood to save his life. He just knew that his Memphis concert went perfectly, that the audience loved him, that he felt safe. Years later, in 1963, 2 years before his death from lung cancer, Nat was being interviewed by Ebony magazine. The journalist asked, "You toured the South during the most dangerous years for black performers. Were you ever afraid?" Nat smiled that gentle smile. "You know, I should have been. The threats were real. The hatred was real. But somehow, I always felt protected, like guardian angels were watching over me." "Guardian angels? Maybe not angels," Nat said thoughtfully. "Maybe just good people. People I never met. People who believe that music matters more than hate, that beauty is worth protecting." He looked out the window. "I like to think that somewhere out there, people were fighting for me when I didn't even know I needed fighting for. That's faith. That's love. That's what kept me singing." He was right. That something, that someone, was Bumpy Johnson, carrying a razor and a promise. Harlem's artists are protected, even 1,000 miles from home. In the Memphis boarding house where Bumpy had stayed, the landlady found something after he checked out. An envelope with $100 in cash and a note from Marcus Webb's family. "Tell him William Jackson says thank you." The landlady gave the money to Sweet Sam, who tracked down Marcus. Marcus opened the envelope, read the note, and understood. The voice on the phone had been real. The protection had been real. Nat King Cole had been saved by a man he'd never meet. As for the 6 men in the basement, Thomas Crenshaw's arm never healed right. The scar ran from wrist to elbow, thick and ugly. Robert Hayes left Memphis 6 months later, moved to Oklahoma, never spoke of that September night. David Morrison resigned from the police force in 1951, citing personal reasons. The others stayed in Memphis, stayed quiet, stayed away from black entertainers. And whenever Nat King Cole's name came up on the radio, in the newspapers, in conversation, they changed the subject quickly, because they remembered the man with the razor, and they knew he kept his promises. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. The night 6 racists planned a murder, and Bumpy Johnson stopped it before it began. The night one man's blood was spilled so another man's voice could sing. The night a waiter made a phone call that changed everything. This is the story Nat King Cole never knew, the guardian angel he never met, the protection he never saw. But Harlem knew, Memphis knew, and every racist in the South learned. You can hate, you can threaten, you can plan, but Harlem's artists are protected, always, forever, even 1,000 miles from home. That's not just protection, that's love, and that's power. If this story of courage, sacrifice, and silent heroism moved you, hit that subscribe button and smash that like. Share this with someone who needs to understand that real heroes don't always get credit, they just get the job done. Drop a comment. Have you ever been protected by someone you never knew was there? Let's keep these untold stories alive. The King of Harlem defended our greatest artists, and their stories deserve to be told.